You won't believe this, but my mailbox, yes, a simple mailbox, nearly caused a full-blown neighborhood meltdown. It all started one sunny morning, when I finally replaced my old, rusted box with a brand new one. I'd saved up, picked a modern design, and even added a little flower planter at the bottom to make it look welcoming. I thought it looked perfect, but apparently my neighbor Karen didn't share my enthusiasm. Now you have to understand something about Karen. She's the self-appointed sheriff of our street, the type of neighbor who thinks she's in charge of everyone's business. She memorizes trash schedules, critiques lawn heights, and has even been known to measure people's holiday decorations with a tape measure. So when she saw my new mailbox, I could already feel her eyes burning a hole in my back. I had just finished adjusting the planter when I heard her sandals stomping across the pavement. "Excuse me," she snapped, arms crossed tightly. "That mailbox is not regulation. It's an eyesore, and I won't allow it on this street." I almost laughed, but I could tell she was dead serious. "Karen," I said calmly, "it's a standard USPS-approved mailbox. I even checked the guidelines before buying it." She scoffed, as if I'd just lied to her face. "I'll have you know I'm friends with the Homeowners Association Board, and I know what's allowed around here. That thing is completely out of compliance." I tried to brush it off, but Karen wasn't the type to just walk away. Later that afternoon, while I was watering the flowers by the post, I noticed her pacing in her driveway while on the phone. She kept glancing at me, then back at her phone, her voice rising with that classic Karen shrill. And then it happened. A police cruiser rolled slowly down our street and stopped right in front of my house. My heart sank. Karen had actually called the cops over my mailbox. The officer stepped out, calm and professional, while Karen practically sprinted over to him. "Officer!" "Thank goodness you're here," she said dramatically, pointing at my mailbox like it was a crime scene. "This man has installed an illegal structure that's bringing down our property values." I stood there stunned. A part of me was embarrassed, but another part couldn't wait to see how this officer would react to Karen's ridiculous complaint. Little did I know, what he said next would flip the whole situation upside down and leave Karen fuming. The officer adjusted his sunglasses, giving Karen a polite nod before turning toward me. His expression was neutral, but you could tell he already suspected this wasn't going to be the kind of call that needed handcuffs. "Sir," he said, "do you mind if I take a look at the mailbox?" "Of course," I replied, stepping aside like I was revealing some grand exhibit. Honestly, I was a mix of annoyed and amused. Who in their right mind calls the police over a mailbox? But if this was going to prove Karen wrong once and for all, I was all for it. Karen hovered beside the officer, practically bouncing on her toes. "It's too tall," she insisted. "It's painted an unapproved color. And look at that ridiculous planter. It's a hazard." The officer crouched slightly, running his hand along the post, checking the height, the placement, and the visibility from the street. He even pulled out a little notepad, jotting down measurements. Meanwhile, Karen kept going. I told him this would never fly in our neighborhood. "We have standards, rules, regulations." She said regulations like it was a sacred word carved into stone. Finally, the officer straightened up. He gave the mailbox one last look, then turned to me. "You said you checked the USPS guidelines before installing this?" "Yes, sir," I said confidently. "It's 42 inches from the ground to the box. The post is securely planted, and it's well within the distance from the curb. The planter is decorative and doesn't obstruct access." The officer nodded slowly, then flipped his notepad shut. "That's exactly right. This mailbox meets every single requirement." I could barely hide my grin. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Her face turned red as she sputtered, That can't be true. I've lived here for 15 years. I know what's allowed and what isn't." The officer kept his composure, but I swear I saw the corners of his mouth twitch upward. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "this mailbox is completely legal. In fact, it's one of the nicest installations I've seen in a while. There's no violation here." I thought that would end it, but Karen wasn't ready to let go. "What about the Homeowners Association? He's violating their standards." "You need to make him take it down!" The officer shook his head. "The police don't enforce HOA guidelines. That's between the association and the homeowner. I can only address legal compliance, and this mailbox passes just fine." Karen froze. She didn't expect that answer, and I realized right then this was about to escalate into something even bigger. You'd think that after the officer cleared me, Karen would have backed off. But if there's one thing about her, it's that she never admits defeat. She planted her hands on her hips, leaned in toward the officer, and lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Though everyone on the street could still hear. "Officer, you don't understand," she insisted. "This man is deliberately defying the community's standards. If you let this slide, the whole neighborhood will fall apart. Next thing you know, People will have neon mailboxes, inflatable flamingos, and, heaven forbid, paint their houses purple. The officer, bless his patience, kept a straight face. Ma'am, none of that has anything to do with this mailbox. I can't cite him for a violation that doesn't exist. Karen turned to me, narrowing her eyes like she was facing off with a sworn enemy. You think you're clever, don't you? Hiding behind technicalities. Well, I'll have you know the HOA will not stand for this, and I'll make sure of it. Before I could respond, our other neighbors began trickling outside. I guess the sight of a police cruiser parked on our street was too juicy to ignore. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, people holding coffee mugs, a couple of kids on bikes, even old Mr. Jenkins from across the street, who hadn't left his porch in months. What's going on? Someone asked. Karen wasted no time. She pointed dramatically at my mailbox like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom. He's installed a non-compliant mailbox, and it's against HOA standards. The neighbors looked at each other, puzzled. One woman tilted her head. That's non-compliant? Looks fine to me. Honestly, it's nicer than half of ours. Another neighbor chimed in. Yeah, I've been meaning to replace mine. Where'd you get it? Looks sturdy. Karen's jaw dropped. She wasn't expecting backup from me. She wanted a mob against me. But instead, it seemed like people admired the mailbox more than they cared about her complaints. The officer, sensing the growing audience, decided it was time to wrap things up. Folks, everything here checks out. There's no legal issue with this installation. Unless the HOA decides otherwise, this matter is closed. And with that, he gave me a reassuring nod and headed back to his cruiser. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the murmurs weren't in Karen's favor. I thought it was over, but I underestimated Karen. If she couldn't win with the law, she'd try another angle. And soon, I would find myself in the middle of a neighborhood-wide debate. I never asked for, all because of one mailbox. The very next morning, I woke up to find a bright yellow envelope taped to my front door. Bold letters across the top read, "Notice of violation." My stomach sank, but deep down, I already knew who was behind it. Sure enough, the notice claimed my mailbox, did not conform to neighborhood aesthetic standards, and demanded I remove it within 7 days or face fines. Karen had struck again. I could almost picture her smug grin while typing up that complaint, thinking she'd finally found her silver bullet. But here's the thing, I wasn't about to roll over. I knew my rights, and I wasn't going to let one power-hungry neighbor bully me, so I did what any stubborn homeowner would do. I gathered evidence. I printed out the USPS regulations showing my mailbox met every requirement. I snapped photos of other mailboxes in the neighborhood that were mismatched, crooked, or flat-out falling apart. If Karen wanted a fight, I was ready for it. Later that week, I walked into the HOA meeting, armed with my binder of proof. The room was buzzing. Apparently word about Mailbox Gate had spread, and half the neighborhood showed up just to watch the fireworks. Karen was already there, sitting at the front with her arms folded, eyes locked on me like she was preparing for trial. The HOA president cleared his throat. We're here to address a complaint regarding a newly installed mailbox on Cedar Lane. Karen shot up before he could even finish. Yes, that mailbox is an eyesore. It disrupts the uniform look of our community and sets a dangerous precedent. If we allow this, our neighborhood will lose all sense of order. She went on, her voice rising with every word, until finally the president held up his hand. Thank you, Karen. Let's hear from the homeowner. I stood, calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, I followed every federal regulation when installing that mailbox. It's safe, it's compliant, and frankly, it's better maintained than many on this street. This isn't about rules. It's about one neighbor trying to control everyone else. I opened my binder and showed the documents, the measurements, the photos. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people nodded, clearly siding with me. Then, one neighbor raised their hand. Honestly, his mailbox looks great. Maybe we should encourage others to upgrade theirs. The president leaned back, glancing between me and Karen. And in that moment, I could see the tide turning. For once, Karen didn't have the room under her thumb. But the best part? The HOA's final decision was still to come, and Karen had no idea how badly it would backfire. The HOA board whispered among themselves for a few tense minutes. While the rest of us waited, Karen sat upright, tapping her fingers on the table, clearly expecting them to side with her. I stayed calm, clutching my binder like a shield, though inside my heart was pounding. Finally, the HOA president cleared his throat. After reviewing the complaint and the supporting evidence, the board has determined that the mailbox in question is in full compliance with both federal regulations and our neighborhood's guidelines. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some neighbors clapped quietly, others nodded approvingly. I couldn't help but smile. But the real show was Karen's reaction, her face twisted in disbelief. That's outrageous, she blurted out. You're setting a terrible example. What's next? People painting their fences neon green? The president shook his head. Karen, this is not about hypotheticals. This is about one homeowner who followed the rules. There is no violation here. At that, another board member spoke up. Frankly, I think his mailbox enhances the street. Maybe we should consider updating our guidelines to encourage improvements like this, instead of discouraging them. The room erupted with nods and murmurs of agreement. Neighbors who had been silent until now chimed in, praising the design, even asking me where I bought it. Some joked about starting a mailbox makeover trend. Karen looked around, realizing she had lost the crowd. For someone who thrived on control, that loss hit harder than anything else. This is unbelievable, she muttered, grabbing her purse. Without waiting for the meeting to adjourn, she stormed out, her sandals slapping angrily against the floor. The door slammed behind her, leaving behind a stunned silence that quickly turned into laughter. The president smiled at me. Thank you for handling this with patience. We apologize for the trouble. Rest assured, there will be no further action regarding your mailbox. Walking home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. What started as a ridiculous argument over a mailbox had turned into a small victory. Not just for me, but for everyone tired of Karen's constant meddling. And the best part? My mailbox stood tall and proud, flowers blooming at its base, now a symbol of quiet defiance. Neighbors passing by would compliment it, sometimes with a wink that said, "We all know what you went through." Karen, on the other hand, kept her distance. She still gave me the occasional glare from her driveway, but she never mentioned the mailbox again. In the end, it wasn't just about proving her wrong. It was about showing that sometimes standing your ground against unreasonable people is the only way to truly keep the peace. The mailbox stayed, and so did my victory,